Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 435 chainsaw. The saw has been previously diagnosed as needing an intake boot. I really got this thing torn apart. There are some shortcut methods to replacing the intake boot, but I like to take them all the way down just to kind of ensure that I don't end up with a base gasket problem. So the first thing I have to do is kind of sort out my screws. Anytime I throw everything into a box like this, I like to organize the screws so putting it back together is a little easier. There you can see our hole in the intake boot. That's definitely got to be replaced. There's 4 screws that hold that on. We'll just get that out of the way. And here's our new intake boot. Guess I'm not going to show you the part number. So, could this go together without taking the saw apart? I don't know. I don't think so. Not easily. You'd still have to take a lot of things apart anyway, and the few extra steps to get it to this point here, it's not that much extra work.
What's this do? What's this do?
So this little piece, this insulation wall, kind of like a little jigsaw puzzle piece, it snaps into place. So it's only going to go on one way. And that wall kind of fits in a groove in the crankcase, the orange plastic crankcase there. So I don't even remember if that can come out without loosening the base. This is our cylinder base gasket, the old one. And you know, I've seen it before where guys have loosened the 4 screws that hold this whole cylinder into the crankcase. And these gaskets have been disturbed, and then when they crank it back together, they didn't realize they were disturbed. Then they end up having to take the whole thing apart again anyway. So that's why I like doing it this way. Now, this would be a good time to replace the crank bearing seals as well. In this case, we didn't feel that was necessary. Meaning, I didn't want to spend the money. Whatever.
What's this do? What's this do? Oh, am I so many parts?
So, when you put this back together, really there's nothing special about it except that the crankshaft does have to be in a certain position to clear. You can see right here. It won't clear if you got the weights of the crank hanging down. You got to get it kind of tucked in there. And once you've laid it together like this, keep it together. Don't let it separate without inspecting those base gaskets. Make sure they didn't move. Now that we got a couple screws in there, we're good to go. And in the end, all of this can be verified by doing a pressure vacuum test. So now we'll get the fuel tank in place. And there's an anti-vibe spring in the front, but there's also a buffer about midway. You see this screw right here? It's only got threads on the upper half toward the head. The bottom half is smooth, and it goes into this rubber bushing here. So you'll see we'll get that bushing lined up. We'll drop that screw in, and that just becomes now a locating pin. So the saw can kind of move on that buffer. And then our chain catch and big screw. I mean, this whole repair was, I think I had 33 minutes of video. What did we get it down to? 16. So it's really not that bad of a job. Alright, now we got some kill wires that need to be relocated. There's a hole in the side of the chassis here. We got to get them pulled through. You know, I want to say there was something else I did to this saw while I had it apart, but I did this repair quite a while ago. Alright, now our air filter holder. You know, we got to get the primer bulb pushed through the hole there on the side. We got to get the this piece right here holds the throttle linkage in place, and it snaps into that air filter holder. It's kind of a weird little piece. You got to get it oriented just right. Push it over the throttle rod and then snap it onto the air filter holder. I'm dropping the air filter holder into the rubber grommet that holds the back of it in place. And then we're getting a screw in here just loosely to kind of hold everything together. There's going to be 3 long screws that hold that carburetor on. And I can't get at this one. And not only can I not get at it, but I don't have that choke. You see, I'm trying to pry that red choke lever over the choke pin, the part that the lever actuates, but I couldn't do it without risk of breaking it. So we'll just take it off of there, and that'll allow me access to that last screw. Then when we put the choke lever back on, we can just put it over that locating pin. We're fixing table saws now?
We told this guy we give him the old college try.
Is it that bad that we're fixing woodworking equipment? Alright, we got our carb tightened down. Our throttle linkage goes into the handle. Oh, first we're going to get that wonky piece oriented. Goes into the handle, then we snap that piece down onto the back of the air filter holder. And it just snaps into place. So now we have a flywheel. You know, there's nothing special about this. The key's built into the flywheel. We'll rattle the nut on there. I like to put a rag on the top of the flywheel so I don't tear up my hand if it spins on me. And then we're going to set our ignition coil air gap. We get the gauge lined up between the magnets of the flywheel and the ignition coil. And then we crank the screws down because the magnet will draw the coil up tight. And then we're just double checking. Here we go. Air conductor. It's just a fan shroud. Husky calls it an air conductor. So I got to take one of the screws back out of the coil so I can put a ground wire on it. Get that snugged on nice. Then we'll put the blue wire on the ignition coil. That's our kill wire from the switch. And then we'll get the starter mounted up right away. Still a lot of parts laying on the bench. That fuel return line from the purge bulb gets snapped into a little holder on the air filter holder. There's our air filter. And we gotta get the choke lever on. So you see now I put the choke lever on and there's a pin that's part of the choke linkage on the carburetor. The pin is right there. Now it's in that hook of the choke lever. Before it was outside of that hook. We'll do a little function check here. Everything seems to be working the way it should. This front handle is a little unique in the Husky lineup, that the front part doesn't just strap underneath the fuel tank and get screwed up from the bottom, but it pushed into a slot and the screw goes in from the side. Now we're going to put our brake handle on. Couple of special screws that hold this in place. They've got kind of a bushing built into them. That allows the screw to be tightened up all the way, but the handle to still pivot. I'm going to put a little grease on the crankshaft and the worm gear. Then I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, thinking I want to put the bar and chain on, but we're going to need a clutch. So we'll wipe the schmutz out of this clutch drum here. Here's our bearing. Put a little grease on that. So we'll get that clutch wiped down a little bit as well. And if you look really close, you'll see that the chain guide plate is tore up a little bit on the bottom. I didn't have one here to put on, but we are going to have to replace that. So all this stuff is going to come back apart again anyway, but I want to get this together and make sure it's going to run right. Probably didn't need the bar and chain on there for the test run, but it's all good. Just I like to scrape the debris from the end of the bar just so it sits flat on the mounting pad and we don't have any oil feed problems. Okay, we're all barred up. What's left? Not much. We'll get this cylinder cover on here and we'll see if it's going to run. So that's all I'm going to have for you on Husqvarna 435 intake boot replacement. Thanks for watching. Later.
some chains and a bar. He said his stuff's not cutting straight. I don't know if you can look at the bar,
Okay.
the chains, and be
Okay, we'll
like,
be right up
"Eh,
there."